Oral Microbiology, a documentary, is provided through the courtesy of Orafresh Enterprises.
There are thousands of different species in us and on us and around us. And just as the planet Earth has got different areas with their own diverse climates and residents, so the planet humankind has got different zones. For example, the head and the mouth are both really fertile resorts that attract their own specific kind of residents and visitors.
Well, it's been estimated that the human is composed of approximately 100 trillion cells. Of that 100 trillion cells, only 10%, or 10 trillion cells, are actually human. The vast remainder of those cells are bacterial cells.
So these frantically active bacterial cells are an integral part of us, as they are with every life form, living on and deep within even the orifices of the human head.
Everything on this earth is bathed in germs. Germs have manifested themselves in and on every living thing, including man. Man is a very attractive host because man provides a place where germs can survive and propagate. It provides foodstuff, a moist environment.
And that moist environment provides a stable and comfortable home for more than 1,000 different species of microorganisms, mostly bacteria. Magnified up to 10,000 times, the bacteria inside our mouths look like this. The rod-shaped ones are called bacilli. The round ones, here bunched together like grapes, are the cocci. Those are two of the most common types of bacteria. The spiraling corkscrew ones are called spirochetes. It looks chaotic in there, but these bacterial creatures are extremely methodical and organized. In fact, when you look closer, you discover that they have distinct colonies and communities.
Microorganisms live in communities for the same reason that we do. They live in communities which feed their needs, sustain them in terms of their living conditions or growth conditions that they prefer, and the microorganisms all contribute to the community to optimize the survival of the community. And it sounds very much like our cities or our villages where we congregate.
It's teeming. I mean, all of your body is teeming with bacteria, and they're there for a purpose. I mean, they're there to protect you, but they're also living their own life, and they're multiplying, and they're sharing genes, sharing DNA, and so it's actually quite a large metropolis. You have a pen, and you stick it in your mouth. What's in your mouth is then on the pen, and depending on the ability to survive in a hostile environment, like a dry air, no nutrients outside of the mouth, then that can be transmitted to the next person that picks it up.
And look at the bacteria that we found living on the pen. This is a relatively clean mouth, but after the bacteria on the pen are introduced, it looks like this, packed with densely growing foreigners. And then there's the issue of our non-human relationships. Not all of the bacteria that invade our mouths are necessarily human. We love our pets. I mean, they're members of the family and all that. But given the things they sniff at and the places they lick, most of us would just as soon not do this.
Come on, love.
Well, maybe what he doesn't know won't hurt him. Microscopically speaking, here's what just happened as bacteria travel from dog to woman to man. This is a sample taken from the scrapings of the dog's tongue. Pretty clean. And this is a typical saliva sample from a human mouth. It's loaded with bacteria. Comparing the two, it's no surprise that a human bite can be far more dangerous than a dog bite. Which would you rather have?
If I had my choice, I guess it would probably be more likely the dog in some circumstances, because there's going to be less bacteria present in that situation. In fact, one of the worst types of infection that we see, especially in the emergency department, is called a clenched fist injury. And that's the Saturday night special where somebody socks someone in the face, the tooth penetrates through the skin into the bone. The bacteria from that tooth get laid in the bone, cause subsequent disease, bony infection called osteomyelitis. And it's a devil of a thing to try to cure.
Mother Nature, in the process of evolution, has evolved a strategy that's really pretty magnificent. It's sort of simplistic, but works incredibly well.
Now I'm going to look at the openings of each of the glands inside your mouth, okay?
Saliva does several things, helps promote the swallowing process. But in addition, the fluid in the saliva contains substances that help fight off the bugs, so to speak. And these are naturally occurring antibacterial substances, for want of a better term. They take various forms, but they're crucially important.
Because we swallow so much of it, we don't realize, until we look, just how much saliva we produce all the time, washing the wildlife out of our mouth and miraculously keeping the lining of the mouth soft, pink and wet.
That's not too uncomfortable, is it? What's the stop?
So anything that interferes with our saliva production puts us at some risk.
What happens at night when you're asleep is that your flow of saliva in your mouth, your spit, dries up. And you know, you wake up in the morning often with a dry mouth. You wake up in the morning with coating on your tongue. And this is because the bacteria in your mouth have had an opportunity for their communities to grow unchecked.
Well, morning breath is a fact of life. Morning breath is an episode of bad breath. During the nighttime when we're sleeping, our mouths are closed, no oxygen. So your mouth becomes almost a perfect anaerobic incubation chamber. And under those conditions, even in the most resistant patient, a level of volatile sulfur compounds will develop in the mouth. That when you wake up and draw your first breath and exhale your first exhale can be offensive to other people.
We'd all like to mask our bad breath if we have it. Every year, billions of dollars are spent on things to cover up and hide our breath problems. But we are social creatures. The source of those social breath problems is the wildlife. It's actually some species of bacteria working on our food and doing what they do best. So most of the bacteria in your mouth start the process of digestion of food, or they occupy vacant spaces so that bad bacteria can't get a toehold. But some species have only one role, and that is to make your breath smell bad.
Well, in the vast majority of cases of bad breath originate from a bacteria that lives in the back of the mouth, primarily on the very back surface of the tongue. These bacteria have the distinct quality of being able to convert proteins to sulfur and its sulfur gases. The process by which these bacteria digest proteins is called putrefaction, for the obvious reason that the odor that's produced is putrid.
See ya.
And there's no mistaking the social effect that putrefaction has. Further into the deep interior of the mouth is the tongue, the mouth's largest muscle. If you're like most people, you need to see what your tongue looks like from time to time. You may even use it as an indicator of your own health. We all think we know what a healthy tongue should look like, and we worry when it doesn't look just so.
Here we see a normal tongue with that nice, moist, velvety surface and slightly longer little white projections along the central fissure. This becomes smoother and more pink towards the front and sides of the tongue, and at the back we should be able to see some of the tasting papillae.
And from the bacterium's point of view, the tongue is
absolute paradise. The tongue is an amazing stretch of body carpet. When you look elsewhere in the mouth, it's flat, it's moist, but essentially it's smooth. When you come to the top of the tongue, however, it's got a velvet-like surface, which when magnified gives an enormous surface area. So as a bacterium, I would just burrow down into those most hospitable depths, set up camp, and enjoy paradise.
And there's another group of wildlife organisms that also find it hospitable, the yeasts or fungi. The most well-known fungus is Candida. It's those white clumps you can see on the back of the tongue. In itself, Candida is not much to worry about. It lives peacefully in almost everybody's mouth, and in normal everyday life, it doesn't cause much trouble. While infections of the tongue may be relatively uncommon, tooth decay is not. Like the system of underground caves found in this forest, the surface of a tooth is a specialized and challenging terrain. But the bacteria that cause tooth decay have proven themselves over time to be very clever in adapting to the ecosystem of the human mouth.
The key to this whole thing is adaptation. Just as animals, including human beings, could come into caves like this and establish themselves, so species of wildlife would be favored if they had the characteristics that allowed them to explore a nook or a cranny, establish themselves, and then exploit the environment. And species that could do that, explore, establish, and exploit, would do very well for themselves.
The communities of bacteria living on the surface of a tooth have evolved a highly sophisticated system of collaboration. That begins with a film, coming soon to a tooth near you.
You know, from the bacterium's point of view, our teeth and our periodontal areas are a bit like sort of rocky harbours and beaches. They provide shelter from the waves and torrents of saliva that flush through the mouth. And just like these rocks and the pools around them allow the development of a community of algae and seaweed and other life forms, so uncleaned teeth allow the development of a whole bunch of different life forms around them. The only difference is that these are some of the most beautiful places on Earth, and uncleaned teeth aren't.
Bacteria, especially the ones involved in tooth decay, have learned to be stealth-like, seeming to swirl innocuously around our gum lines, but actually setting up decoys and disguising their true intentions.
We're always trying to fight and remove the bacteria that are on our teeth. And they have evolved a lot of defense mechanisms that enable them to persist in a hostile environment.
Every night, millions of bacteria who survived last night's frontal assault by your toothbrush regroup to become part of a sticky coating on your teeth called a biofilm.
It is sort of a slime, if you will, that lives on the teeth. If they're removed or if they're disrupted, they very quickly rebound and repopulate to form what's called this biofilm.
The same type of slimy coating is found everywhere in nature, around the edges of lakes and marshes, covering rocks in rivers, the pond scum that you see floating on the water. All these are biofilms, made up of life forms that have learned that there is strength in numbers and that survival depends on sticking together. So while we sleep, the bacteria start by making a simple layer of slime, one cell deep. That's the front line of attack. Part of their job is to establish a communication link with the rest of the waiting troops, allowing the biofilm within hours to grow into a deep, dense cloud.
We in our communities exchange information, and so do bacteria living in biofilms. And they do this by a very, very clever chemical signaling system where they can sense signals from one another.
It's estimated that 2/3 of all bacterial infections in the mouth are caused by microbes that have joined forces as part of a biofilm community. The type of biofilm that's the key to tooth decay is better known as dental plaque.
Dental plaque isn't caused by one particular type of bacterium. It's a collaborative team effort, really, like a football game. But there is one particular species of bacterium that always starts the ball rolling.
Its name is Streptococcus mutans, and it's the first to latch onto your tooth. In fact, it's the only bacterium that can stick to the tooth's surface. Once it latches on, other bacteria then attach themselves to the strep mutans, piling up on top and working collectively to attack the tooth. So the undisputed team leader, tough, aggressive, and adaptable, is strep mutans.
This would be an organism that would be in your face.
All right!
This would be an organism that had incredible intelligence, and it had the ability to adapt itself to conditions and to create the conditions that it wanted. It has a type A personality.
Under microscopic examination, states of disease are far busier and more spectacular looking than good health. These images show the body's white blood cells clustered in the center attacking an infection in the mouth. At even higher magnification, the activity is seen as even more intense. It's really a life and death struggle at the bacterial level. New research is tracking links between our genetic makeup, lifestyle, mostly diet, and the ability of smart bacteria like strep mutans to evolve strategies that guarantee their survival. As the newborn child is sustained by its mother's milk, a most intimate bonding and transfer occurs. Physical, emotional, and bacteriological. This contact between the infant's pristine mouth and the skin of the mother's breast with its usual burden of normal bacteria comes as the baby's immune system is programmed to accept the wildlife from the outside world.
We sampled newborns right after birth, and we quantitated bacteria, found very little. And in a period of 3 days, we found adult levels of bacteria. In most cases, the child's bacterial strains in the mouth matched perfectly those of her mother.
The first microorganisms that actually colonize us as infants when we're newborns are those that actually depend on adherence to soft tissues in the mouth, like the tongue, because the teeth aren't in yet. We derive them from the people who handle us most closely, mostly our mothers, and they come via contamination from kissing, close cuddling, sharing food implements.
And our susceptibility to decay and other oral disease is also transferred from mother to child in that critical period after birth. At least, that's what we've always believed. Until now, at the University of North Carolina, groundbreaking research suggests that this transfer from mother to child may begin even earlier.
We've also seen, I think fairly surprisingly, in pregnant women, that these oral organisms can actually get to the fetus and create a challenge to the fetus. We know that they're getting systemically and that they're spreading throughout the mother's bloodstream, but it is surprising to us that some of these oral organisms are actually getting to the fetus and appear to cross the fetal placental barrier, that the baby in utero is becoming exposed to this infection from the mother's mouth.
We used to think of the fetus, developing quietly inside the mother's womb, as being in a true sanctuary. Now, that assumption is being challenged. Extraordinary as it may seem, some of the mother's bacteria get across the placenta. And that may be not only helpful, but even necessary to stimulate the maturation of the immune system. It's a world within a world within a world. As we grow, the mouth is not the only gateway on the face that matters. Further north, there are other portals targeted by our wildlife. The ones we use for looking out and breathing in. Lots of people do this every day. They use their own saliva instead of the correct solution. Of course, they're not supposed to, but most of the time they get away with it.
So you do next weekend?
But with so many bacterial biofilms so well established in the mouth, why don't people get eye infections very often?
I guess two reasons. There's a good irrigation system. The tears are produced in the lacrimal area across the cornea and then down into the tear duct. And there's also an antibacterial agent in the tears that works very well.
This microbiology lab agreed to help us investigate the workings of this antibacterial agent.
This is a suspension of the bacteria, solution of bacteria that are normally found on the skin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cotton swab, put it in the suspension to get all the bacteria that I can on this cotton swab. And I'm then going to take an agar plate. This is the culture plate that will grow bacteria. And I'm going to spread that suspension of bacteria on the agar plate. And I'm also going to repeat it on the second plate. So again, there's a nice lawn of bacterial growth that we should see after these have been incubated overnight for 12 or 18 hours.
Now, for a good supply of fresh tears, we enlisted the help of a fairly reliable catalyst, the lowly onion.
And what I'm going to do now is take this fresh cotton swab, put it into the tears, get it soaked with the tears. And then I'm going to inoculate one of the plates. I'm actually going to write the word tears on the plate. We're in the walk-in incubator. This is where the plates that we cultured yesterday were incubated, and they've now been incubating overnight, about 12 or 14 hours. Let's see what's grown. This first plate is the plate that we cultured without adding any tears to the media. And what we can see is a fine lawn of bacterial growth. These are the normal bacteria found on the skin and around the eyes, and they've grown quite nicely. The second plate is where we added the tears. And indeed, you'll remember I actually tried to write the word tears, and you can see it printed here. And that's because tears contain in them an enzyme called lysozyme, and it inhibits bacterial growth. And so what's happened here is that the bacteria, where in contact with the tears, didn't grow.
So that's why the eyes are so rarely bothered by traffic from the human zoo of the mouth. The nose, by contrast, is a different story. It's just a cold, we say. Most of us try to carry on, but there's something about the nose that makes us want to touch it continually, particularly when it's irritated or itchy. And after you've done that, when you next make contact with somebody, you're not just greeting them, you're giving them a surprise welcoming party of a whole host of new friends.
It replicates to very high numbers. There's large numbers of them. It's a gang attack. They're found in all the secretions and the nasal secretions. So not only are they found in large numbers, which increase the likelihood that they're going to be transmitted, but they cause the body to have this excessive mucus secretion, sneezing, fluid, blowing your nose, all of that secretion containing the virus, which is readily able to be transmitted subsequently to an unknowing host.
Giving vent to a huge sneeze releases a cloud of about 250,000 droplets. They spread out as far as 8 feet from the nose, any and all available surfaces. The virus can live for up to 8 hours in a single droplet. It can live on your hands for about 20 minutes and on dry surfaces, such as desks, telephones or keyboards, for several hours. The chance of touching someone or something within that time is quite high. Even if you don't directly contact a new potential victim, you can still leave a surprise for them on the doorknob or on any other inanimate object that changes hands.
.9% of all the bacteria and viruses that we live with are living with us in symbiosis. They're not causing disease, and they are being transmitted from person to person. But there is this situation where you can have a particularly nasty bacteria or a virus that is able to colonize an inanimate surface, such as money.
Oh, before you go, I should give you the money out of there. Okay. Sorry.
So what is the answer? Should we all be laundering our money? How do we prevent contamination from all the viruses and bacteria that we meet in our day?
What can we do about it to protect ourselves? Simple hygiene measures such as soap and water. You don't need antibiotic soaps. You don't need any special formulations. Just good old soap and water and rinsing and common sense will prevent these bacteria that should stay where they are and not cause disease in us.
Soap and water. It really is that simple. Over millions of years, these life forms have co-evolved with us. From our first breath, our first human contact, and through all of the stages of life, these bacterial organisms are intimately involved in our health and our well-being.
Sure, some are enemies, and it's good to know how to avoid common colds and dental plaque, but most of the species of human wildlife up here are completely harmless. The more we know about them, the less we worry about them. And that's kind of reassuring, on the face of it anyway.
Oral Microbiology, a documentary, has been provided through the courtesy of Orafresh Enterprises.